What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is the Bad Batch Season 3, Episodes 1 through 5, and yeah, I'm going to tackle this basically the same way that I've tackled all the other Star Wars animated shows, because I just don't feel like if I did 3 episodes at a time, it would be enough to take up a video, because there's just not enough to talk about in only 30-minute episodes. But this one's going to be a little different, because most of the time I try to either do half and half, or I just do the whole season if it's not that many episodes. But since this one is 15, the OCD part of my brain is like, I'm not going to do half and half, because then it would be 8 and 7, and that's not the same number. So that feels weird. So I want to do the same number. So I'm going to do 5, 5, and 5. That's how I want to do it. So I'm going to do it that way. I hope you guys don't mind if anybody even watches this. But anyways, yeah, this first 5 episodes, though, pretty solid start to this final season, because I'm pretty sure I've heard that this is the final season of the Bad Batch. And it didn't exactly go where I thought it was going to go, but I do have some questions that they've brought up that I'm intrigued to find the answers for, because they've done a good job of keeping my interest so far. And that's something that I will say about the Bad Batch is it's a show that I wasn't really sure how I was going to feel about it, only because, I mean, I thought the Bad Batch was fine in the episode they were introduced in Clone Wars, but I didn't really see much of a potential for a show with them. But whoever the writing team is for this show, they've been punching way above their class, because this show has actually been really intriguing and really well written into a way where it's just these random defective clones, and yet I'm so interested to find out more, and I want to see where their story goes and how it all comes to an end, and what's this whole thing that Hemlock is doing on this island, or not island, but in this laboratory. Like, what is going on there? Is it what I'm thinking, where because he's looking into cloning, this is how we get, future clones like Snoke and stuff? I don't know, but I'm curious. And honestly, it's something that I do have to appreciate a little bit, mainly because I do think the sequel Star Wars trilogy was not well written. It was just all over the place. It felt like there was no clear direction. However, I do have to say, what they've done with Star Wars since then, kind of filling in some of the gaps, it's been pretty good. I think they've done an okay job of answering some of the questions and filling in those plot holes that did sort of feel like they just popped up out of nowhere. It's something that, on the one hand, they did make the mistake to begin with by writing all of these stories that didn't really connect and did feel very much sporadic, I guess is the best word I can think of. So on the one hand, yes, that is their fault. However, I do have to give them props for actually coming back, maybe doing some retconning a little bit, but actually giving us some answers for some of these questions that are just, oh yeah, Emperor Palpatine returned somehow. I like the fact that we are getting seemingly some answers from that. So far with the Bad Batch, it feels like it's setting up for that. We're seeing how Hemlock has discovered that Omega's blood is the one that's needed, and I'm assuming that's going to lead to them trying to get her back. And presumably, I don't know how they're going to use her blood. I don't know if that little bit that they got from her was enough to maybe make the one Palpatine clone that we see at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, and then all the other ones, they just couldn't get the cloning process off the ground well enough, and so that's why we have some disfigured clones looking like Snoke. I don't know. Just some thoughts that are popping into my mind. But starting with the first episode, Confined, it's a pretty good starting episode, seeing Omega's plight, seeing Crosshair's plight, and seeing how the whole laboratory is run. I think it was a good base building episode, and I like that it stuck to its purpose in that way. It was just meant to basically get us reintroduced to where everything left off last season, and they did that. And I feel like it's important to have an episode like that in a show that is so story driven, because that's really what I'm here for. I'm here for what the story has brought. The characters themselves are interesting enough, this whole defective set of clones. I like that story fine, but what's really grabbed me is this overarching story that they've introduced. So getting us reacquainted with where everything was, seeing how this laboratory works, because in a couple episodes, Omega's going to start working on her escape. I think it's a good setup, so that way we're prepared for when we get to that episode. And then episode 2, Paths Unknown. This is more so bringing us up to date on what Hunter and Wrecker are currently doing. I don't really know if the kids that they meet, the kid clones that they meet, are going to come back at all, if they're going to be important at all. It did feel a little bit just out of nowhere that these kids are just hanging out on this planet where the base used to be. I don't know if it's supposed to be a reference to something else. It was weird to see what looks like kind of a forest sarlacc. I don't know if that's a thing, but it looked like a sarlacc, but it had like vines instead of tentacles. I don't know. It was very creepy looking and very well designed. And I did like the fact that they just sort of dumped all of the explosives into its mouth to kill it. So it was a fun, exciting little set piece. And again, we're seeing how Hunter and Wrecker are doing everything that they can to get Omega back. So it's a good update for them. But that's kind of all that episode is. It doesn't really give us any more information. And again, if those kids never come back, it will feel like a little bit of a wasted episode in some respects. And then episode 3, Shadows of Tantus. This is where we do start to get the plot moving. Obviously, Omega and Crosshair escape in this episode, but we also do see Palpatine showing up to talk to Hemlock. And this is what gets my mind thinking that this is about trying to clone him for the future. I don't know how all that's going to work. You know, it's very up in the air, and it does feel like it does sort of take the whole idea of what he was saying in The Rise of Skywalker to Kylo Ren when he was like, how are you still alive? Oh, the dark side is a ways too many things some might find unnatural. Like that. So it wasn't anything to do with the dark side. You had cloning technology and you used it. That's what it feels like. Where before it seemed like maybe they were using the dark side, or he was using the dark side somehow to keep himself alive or to make other versions of himself. I don't know. I had other ideas on how that worked. And so the fact that it seems like it was just he cloned himself, that seems to be where this is all headed, but I can't be for sure yet until we see how this all comes to an end. But I think Omega and Crosshair's escape, while maybe a little simplistic and also kind of a little predictable, especially since she let she let Batcher out, and then she goes out there and sure enough, Batcher's still alive and she saves them. It was a little cliche, I suppose, but it was a fun little escape attempt and managed to get away, and that kind of sets up for the next episode. But with episode 4, a different approach. This one did feel like the most filler because the only thing that really happened was Omega and Crosshair managed to find another shuttle, and then they get away, and then they find Hunter and Wrecker. That's kind of the whole thing, but it's filled up with so much other things, like them crash landing, them trying to get all these credits to get on a train, and then Omega does get the credits, but then Batcher gets taken, but then they have to go find Batcher, but then they end up being caught or nearly captured by Imperials, and then they have to get away from that. And it just does feel like it's okay, we know what's going to happen. We know they're going to get away. We know they're not just going to get captured by the Empire again before they can get out of there. So it did just feel kind of a little bit like filler. It was kind of a fun little Easter egg for me, though, because the voice of the captain, who I think his name is Captain Man, I did find out apparently he's the same guy that voiced Ultima in Final Fantasy 16. And there were a few lines where I did kind of hear the similar voice. He was putting on a very different voice here. But it was kind of just a fun little, I'm like, I feel like I recognize that voice sometimes. So to find out that's who he voiced, it's like, they were right next to each other too. It was, he voiced Ultima and then he voiced this captain. How does you go from voicing the big bad in a Final Fantasy game to voicing some random Imperial captain in an episode of The Bad Batch? Like, how does that even work? It was kind of funny. And then finally, episode 5, The Return. This is a very good episode, a very good character building episode for me, because we see Crosshair return to the group, but there is that tension. And of course there should be. I do kind of wish we could have seen the initial conversation that happened when Crosshair showed up at the end of episode 4, but we kind of skip ahead. They're living on that island, which the name escapes me at the moment, the Paradise Island that they're living on. So they're there, and we see that there's that tension. Crosshair's going off on his own. I wish we could have had maybe a little bit of conversation initially, and it didn't feel like they were just, all right, come to this island, but we still don't trust you, so we're not going to talk to you. I kind of wish there wasn't a time gap there. I wish it were more so just go a little bit ahead right after episode 4. Maybe they're on their way to that island, but there's that disconnect, and they're not sure if they should take Crosshair there because they're not sure if they trust him. But that's not what they did. They decided to just take him and then still not trust him, and then have the fight happen much later. And it still worked. It was still fine. I just personally think it would have worked a bit better if they hadn't taken him to the island first, because that does feel like kind of a big trust thing. But with this episode, though, there were several good moments in between, like Hunter and Crosshair. There were good moments between Omega and Echo as well, talking about some of the back and forth between Hunter and Crosshair and how they tend to work things out. I don't know. I had a good time with it overall. It was also interesting to return to the base where Crosshair committed his first crime that put him against the Empire. So it was overall a very fun episode. I will say I don't remember if Crosshair's hand twitching. I don't remember if that's something that happened in the previous season. It doesn't feel familiar, so I don't know if this is something we're not supposed to know about yet, or if this is something that has already been discussed and I've forgotten about it. But obviously it's affecting his ability to shoot the sniper rifle. I don't know if this is something that maybe when he took his chip out or whatever to get rid of the memory programming or whatever that was, I don't know if maybe that affected his abilities somehow, and so he's not quite as effective, or if this has anything to do, because I know they were pretty much torturing him, or Hemlock and his people were torturing him last season, so I don't know if maybe that has something to do with it. So it seems like it's going to be a plot point that comes up later. I kind of hope we get to it sooner rather than later, because we saw a couple of instances of it, and it never really got brought up as to what's going on there, why that's happening. So either I've forgotten it or they're keeping it hidden for mystery's sake. And either way, I'm kind of just ready to find out the answer so we can move on, because that is not quite as important to me as everything else going on. So I don't want to spend too much time or too much more time there. But yeah, like I said, it's a good start to this season. It brings up a lot of questions. It brings up a lot of intriguing mysteries that I'm excited to see the answer to. I'm fairly certain this is leading toward the cloning project for Emperor Palpatine, and this is how he's going to continue to live on. But there still is just a lot of questions as to, well, what's going to happen with it, though? And with Hemlock, what is he hoping to gain out of it? Like, he seems to be very much the evil scientist that is more so just interested in the scientific process of cloning. He doesn't really care about the Empire or completing their objectives. It feels like he just wants to get this done. He wants to find out how to do this for himself. And it's almost like a sociopathic way of thinking that this is more important to him than the cost of the lives that it will take to complete the project. So it's kind of he's a fun villain for the show. He's definitely, it's funny because I was actually, just watched Ahsoka and seeing Thrawn back and how much I love him as a villain. He's one of the best villains in Star Wars. Hemlock is not quite up there, but he is one of the most intriguing villains for me, only because he is probably the most just sociopathic. Like most of the other villains, they have a goal. They want to rule the world. They want to be powerful. They want to feel powerful. Hemlock doesn't seem like somebody who wants a lot of power. He seems like a mad scientist who is just so goal driven to figure this stuff out. And again, the human life doesn't seem to mean much to him because of that. They're all just guinea pigs in his little process. And it's kind of fun to have a very different villain like that, especially in what is more of a kid's show, with the animation and stuff. It's not something that I would figure most Star Wars, at least casual Star Wars fans, most of them are probably not watching the animated shows because they probably are thinking, oh, that's just kid stuff. But in reality, Hemlock's whole character seems a lot more of a mature theme. And I'm not really sure kids would understand just how messed up this guy is, that he is willing to go to these lengths to figure this all out. And the thing is, we don't know for sure what his motivations are, so I do kind of hope we get a little bit more explanation. I'm assuming he wants to figure this out for science, but we've not actually gotten confirmation on that. It does seem like he's just helping the Emperor at this point, but who knows? Maybe he sees some future for himself if he manages to get this done. If I had a prediction for how his story is going to end, if he does manage to get the cloning process figured out, or if he does manage to at least get one clone for Palpatine or something like that, I almost kind of wonder if Palpatine's going to be like, oh, thank you for this, and then kill him. Because for Palpatine, this guy would have too much knowledge and power of what's going on behind the scenes. This seems like something that Palpatine wants to keep under wraps, which means all these people, once the project is done, once it's finished, all these people are going to be liabilities who could reveal this information later. So I almost kind of wonder if this is going to be one of those getting more than you bargained for stories for Hemlock, where he does manage to succeed at some point, but that results in Palpatine taking him out because he's going to be too much of a liability at that point. Just a guess. We'll see where it goes, but I don't know. I'm kind of excited to see more of this story and see where it's all going to go from here. So, with all that being said, though, that's it for these first 5 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the first part of the season? What are your thoughts on Bad Batch as a whole? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Bad Batch reviews. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. And I'll talk to you all later. Peace out.